grateful for the invitation to speak to everyone about educational publishing. Our journal is the International Review of Research in Open and Distributed Learning. We did change the name, but we didn't change the acronym, so we're hoping we're safe. And we changed the name because we got $20,000 from UNESCO in order to do so. The idea was to change the emphasis from not just distance education, but to also include open education and blended learning and other forms of technology-enhanced learning. And we have done that, and we are now accepting a greater percentage of articles about open education. This presentation is also partially done, or 50-50, between myself and Professor Terry Anderson over there, soon to be retired. And I always like to have Terry in the room with me, because then I know I'm not the oldest person in the room. Let's start off talking about scholarly publications, and it is clear that scholarly publications are by far the most profitable sector of the entire publishing industry. And it's pretty easy to understand why. They get the articles for free, they get reviewers for free, they get the copyright for free, and then they charge huge amounts of money to university libraries in order to access the content. So it's a gravy train for the publishers. So they're not going to give it up, and they're going to fight to keep it. And then I'll talk more about gold open access later, but also now they've got a new scheme where they support open access, but now instead of giving them the publication and the copyright, you pay. I think, wow, how brilliant these people are. They know how to money. They support open access, and now instead of getting it for free, you pay them in order to publish with them. So it's a very profitable part of the industry. And let's look. The world's largest publisher, Elsevier, they made 724 million pounds in revenue on revenues of $2 billion, their profit, an operating profit margin of 36%, and their CEO, he made 4.5 million pounds, not dollars, pound, that's about $6 million. So yes, it's very profitable, and again, he's profiting off of free content, freely given with free reviewers and free copyright. There was a recent journal in Australia, the Medical Journal of Australia, that just joined, that was sold to Elsevier, and the 19 members of the copyright board resigned. So there's an ongoing battle between open access and commercial publishing in the journal scene. You often hear people saying, well, how can open access, how can you sustain it? And from my cultural background, I'm an Irish background, and we often answer a question with a question. And we say, well, how can the present system be sustained? And right now, actually a few days ago, last week, Harvard decided they couldn't afford to pay for all the subscriptions. And there is no university today that can really can afford to pay for all the subscriptions that are asked for by their faculty. So that system cannot be sustained. We cannot keep paying our very small university pays $350,000 a year for subscriptions. An average university is paying in the millions of dollars for subscriptions. This cannot be sustained. So when people talk about, can open access be sustained? Ask, how can the present one be sustained? And we know it can't. They keep putting up their prices every year. Their costs keep going down because of digitalization, and yet the prices keep going up and up and up every year. You can acquire the database access in bundles, and they increase the pricing on journals all the time. They're always jacking up the prices, and I have below the link to the article on Harvard, where they're basically saying they can't afford anymore to pay these subscriptions. And if Harvard, with their huge endowments, cannot afford to pay for the subscriptions, how can the rest of us? So that type of that scenario where we continue to pay Elsevier and all of these other commercial entities is just not one that is sustainable. So we have to look at other ways of how we can ensure continuous access to scholarly research. And open access is one of the ways that we can do that. The way it is now is that the commercial publishers control scholarly publication. And we had a discussion about that this morning, and they make the rules. They're the ones who come up with the citation indexes and impact measures, etc. And we have no control over that. Our community, our scholarly community, should be in control of that, but we're not. We're allowing these private major publishers to control our field and our profession. Now, publishers, they're on a gravy train, so I don't really blame them for hanging on and maintaining their profit, and I do blame them for increasing the prices when they're making so much money. But they're going to keep pushing to keep the gravy train coming. They've just got the money, just keeps coming from them, from taxpayers through the university into their pockets. So they're very happy about that. How are they reacting? Well, one of the ways is that many of them have been ignoring open access. And that was the first stage when the open access movement began. And that's changing now to where they're actively fighting open access. They're actively lobbying for anti-open access legislation. A big one is they try to discredit the quality of open access. And they discriminate against open education resources and open access journals in Citation Index. It's very difficult to get your open access journal accepted in the indexes. These are just some of the ways that they are reacting to the growth of open access. And I mentioned it before, the best way, you have to admire them. They came up with the idea of, we support open access, and they came up with the idea of gold open access. That is, you pay us, and then you can release it as open access. And this is wonderful. So now instead of giving it to them, you pay them in order to do it. And the reviewers are all done for free. And so you can see there that researchers, they pay the processing charges. It goes to the publishers. They get money from other sources, advertising, from donations, other government subsidies. And there is also the green open access, where really a green open access is nice, but you don't get credit if you want promotion or tenure. If you're looking for promotion and tenure, by putting your research into a repository. Sort of trapped, you have to go into journals that are indexed if you're looking for promotion and tenure. So, again, we have a question here. What is open access? And SPARC, the Society of Scholarly Publication and Research Council in the United States, they make it very clear that they want CC BY, the most open license, Creative Commons attribution. So it's open to everyone, shared by anyone. Anyone can use it any way they want. They just have to attribute the author. And others have added restrictions to that. And we started out that way. Actually, in IRRODL, we started out before the Creative Commons license was available. And we just put it out online and anyone could read it. And that's the way a lot of journals are still doing it. They think they're open because it's online and anyone can read it. But people can't download it legally unless you put a sharing license on, like Creative Commons. Unless you're in Canada, where we have very liberal fair dealing rights and you can download articles and use them and distribute them to your class. But in most countries you can't do that. Then we decided, okay, we'll go to Creative Commons, and we put in the two restrictions: no derivatives and non-commercial. Because we had a deathly fear that somebody would come along and make a lot of money from our journal. And the no derivatives, we didn't want them changing any of our articles. But after about 5 or 6 years, we found nobody was looking for money to make money out of us, and nobody was changing our articles. And we thought, why do we have those restrictions in there? And now we're fully CC BY licensed, and we no longer have those restrictions. And I'd suggest that those restrictions make it difficult for people to integrate them with other license work. If you're putting a number of open license work together, and some are CC BY, some are CC BY ND, some are NC, this one's ND and NC, and you get a mishmash of different licenses. And that makes it very difficult for people to make use of your work, integrating it with other work. We publish in IRRODL in 4 formats, and we believe that's a type of openness, where we publish in EPUB, in PDF, in HTML, and in MP3. So again, that's another aspect of what is open. You could have the best openly licensed material around, but if people can't actually access it in some kind of an open format, then it isn't really open. Hegel put it this way: the synthetic solution to these conflicts can't be introduced unless those being manipulated take a side that will advance the predetermined agenda. And we are being manipulated by the publishers. And we're taking their side. And we are helping to advance the agenda of the publishers. And this is a real conflict. There's a real conflict of interest here, where scholars want to share their resources to make their scholarship available as openly as possible. And the publishers want to make money. And they can only make money by artificially restricting the content, restricting it so as people who don't pay the money can't get it. So they have a monopoly over their resources. And you heard today, and it's in official organizations, the term intellectual property. Now, in many countries this may be true, But in common law countries, based on British common law and American law, it is not true. Copyright is not property. It's clearly, and there's been major court decisions on this, it is not property. Nor is it intellectual. If you look at Britney Spears and some of these other things, there's nothing particularly intellectual about it. But they use the term intellectual property because we all like property and we believe in the principles of private property. So that's why they use these terms, but they're using it in an Orwellian sense, because what they have is a privileged monopoly, that the government interferes in the marketplace and gives a monopoly to publishers with their copyright. They have the monopoly now for 70 years past the death of the author, and this is accepted, unfortunately, but it is not property. And I defy people to check it in the British tradition, and again, I don't know other traditions as well, it is a privileged monopoly. It is not a property right, it is a copyright. In our legal system, you do not own the content. What you possess is a monopoly over that content for a limited period of time. And I think that distinction is very important. But again, if we look back at what Hegel's telling us, we are buying in to their view. We're being manipulated to take their side and to approve their agenda. Now here's a question, people of great interest to us, is does open access increase or decrease citation rates? And it seems the results are mixed. And there's been a few reports on this and cited, and it's not as clear as we thought. We used to be saying, well, you get way more citations if it's open, but it's not that clear. This graph shows that the dark line is the subscription journals, and the other top checked line is with payments. So if you pay the charge, and open access without APC is a lot less, and it is further down. This is it's weighted now here, the citation averages for subscriptions born and ones that, that for subscription journals, born open access journals, and converted open access journals. And as you can see, journals that converted to open access do not have the same citation rates as do the subscription-based and the born open access journals, and which are pretty well equal as time went on, as open access became more popular. Here's another chart showing the average yearly citations for articles. This was published in 2003 and 2004, 2005, 2006. And again, this shows that there was a slight benefit to having open access journals, that they were cited more than non-open access journals. So does open access increase or decrease citation rates in our discipline? Well, an analysis of Google citations for 12 distance education journals using Hartzing's publisher Paris tool, 6 open access, 6 commercially published, and the results showed roughly equal citations per paper, but that citations in open access journals were on their way up. They were on an upward trajectory to surpass the traditional ones. And this graph shows that there's a very high correlation between the amount of views, the downloads of the papers, and the citation impact. So if you're looking at how many views that one of your articles got, it seems to be pretty clear that that parallels the impact factor. So it's one measure that we feel we can use. The technical production costs for one issue of IRRODL are here. We've got the hours for each article, the cost for each article, and the cost for an average of 10 articles per issue. You can see there the total's about $3,000, and we publish in 4 formats: the HTML, PDF, MP3, and EPUB. And so that's more or less the cost that we have at IRRODL. And the number of downloads, notice here the blue line is the biggest, that's the HTML. So they're on the web, it makes sense that most of the downloads are going to be in HTML. The red, the next highest, is PDFs. I guess people want to print it out more, they will use the PDF. And the light green is EPUB, and the dark green is MP3s. And although they're small, it's about an average of 70 downloads per article. It is not insignificant. I mean, there are people who are depending on the EPUB and the MP3 format. The MP3, of course, is an audio format, and for visually impaired people, it's used quite extensively. Oh, that's twice, sorry. Open journal system, publishing and review system. We can see here the growth in open journals and those using the OJS system. So we're talking about from 1990, where it's just a few hundred. Now we're talking about 7,000 journals using the open journal system. So that's a major growth trend, as you can see, going up. Now, what are the benefits of open access? This chart by Danny Kingsley and Sarah Brown puts a lot into them, but it doesn't even mention the one that I think is really important. But let's go through. You get more exposure for your work. Practitioners can apply your findings. You get higher citation rates, which it seems to be trending that way, but we can't really say that for sure yet. Your research can influence policy because people can get it from anywhere. The public can access your findings, whereas commercial journals, you have to go to a university library to get access. It's compliant with grant rules. Taxpayers get value for their money, and researchers in developing countries can see your work. But the reason I got into open access and into open educational resources was in the late 90s and trying to work with collaborators in different universities with different copyright rules and different copyright attitudes. And we found that we were trying to share learning objects to create courses on mobile devices and other things. And we found if it was commercially copyrighted, we couldn't use it. We would have to get permission to use it in this way, permission to get it to use it in that way. You have permission to use it in those 2 ways, and you find out there's a 3rd way you'd like to use it, and then you need permission for that. And some of them want money for permission, and some of them you don't even know how to find the person who owns the copyright to get the permission. And we found it became impossible for us to work with commercial content, that we needed open content in order to be able to do our work. And I think this is a really important aspect of open education resources, open access, is that you're free to use it however you want. You can share it, you can change it, mix it, mash it, do what you want with it. You cannot do that with commercial content. And it is very problematic. The worst thing isn't even paying. Sometimes the fee is only a few dollars, but it's the amount of effort that you have to put in to find who owns it and how to get the copyright, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, another big problem that's come up in the last 2 years, they've been around longer, but in the last 2 years it's becoming very noticeable, are these predatory open access publishers. Spammers, they soliciting for gaining income. So, hey, gold open access, I'll set up my journal and I'll solicit people, and then you say, yeah, I want your article, please publish your article with me and pay me $2,000. And they give names often quite close or even the same name as legitimate journals, and it's a growing problem. And they're nothing more than vanity presses. But a lot of young researchers don't understand that and could get themselves into a lot of trouble. These predatory publishers accept anything. All you have to do is pay them. And there's no real peer review in it at all. So we have to be very careful of that. This is a very unfortunate aspect. And when people are criticizing open access, they refer to these type of predatory publishers quite a bit, and it blackens the name of the really legitimate open access journals. David Golub put it this way, for those who are wondering about opening up their journals. If you think that making money by giving away content is a bad idea, you should see what happens when one tries to make money selling your content. You know, very few educators are making money selling their content. I mentioned this morning my best-selling book on learning objects cost $280. It was a bestseller. I sold 350 copies, and I hardly made any money out. I think I got one royalty check once, and Terry and I went to the pub and we drank it. So what do we do? Well, here's some things that I'm doing, and I'm encouraging other academics to do, is submit only to open access journals. The more of us that do this, the faster the growth, the greater the growth of open access. Yes, and use open access repositories. Even as you publish, publish with a commercial publisher, and I can see why, especially some young researchers who are looking for tenure, go to the commercial publisher, but then put your article in a repository. Don't do any reviews for commercial journals. Why do that? Why should I donate my time and effort so as the president of Elsevier can make £4.5 million? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. We're all work. He's got millions of academics around the world working for free from him, and he's pocketing the money. So I say, you know, when I get a request from an Elsevier or other commercial journal, I say, sure, I'll do it, $100, and I'll donate the $100 to the open access movement. Of course, they've never given me the $100. Then again, I haven't done any reviews for them either. So I've already been into the problem of gold open access and what a gravy train that is for the publishers. I think we've got to get away from that somehow and find a way, other ways of supporting our open journals. And the one I've mentioned is that the library dollars can support it. Our libraries have a sustainable fund of money every year that goes to commercial journals. We can divert some of that money to open access. And as the open access movement grows, we can divert more of that money to open access. The money is in the system. We do not need new money. In fact, if we do this right, we could save money, save considerable money by moving towards open access. And I put it to you what other ways we can possibly achieve it. We discussed this morning, Martin Weller said he gives his journal to a nonprofit publisher who does all the publishing for him. So we don't have to do the publishing in-house. We can contract with publishers, usually small local publishers, and help build them up. But instead of the publishers controlling us, we control the publishers. So it's not against private enterprise or the publishing industry. On the contrary, this could be a boon for small publishers and in local areas. So, are you ready to take the pledge? I'll no longer submit my work to closed publications, nor participate in review or editorial functions for closed publications. I'll leave you with that sentiment. Thank you very much.